I devoured the books because they were the rays of light peeking out from the doorframe, and perhaps past the door there was another world, one beyond the gripping fear that ungirded the dreams. And that's from page 34 of Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. This is nonfiction genre, published in 2015 by One World, and won the National Book Award. It's only 152 pages, and it's medium paced. Yeah, I guess that sounds weird. I read this book as part of my Interview the Vampire inspired readathon, where I'm exploring different shelves of different characters. And for the next 2 months, that would be Louis. So 8 books on Louis de Pointe-du-Lac's bookshelf. And this prompt is Louis is a storyteller, which I really tried to grab a book that exemplifies what are the stories we tell about ourselves to others in order to be perceived. How does the past inform our present experiences? And this book is written as a letter, very much in the vein of The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin. Another author that did this similarly is Dom Lemon with This Is a Fire, which I think I read like last year. And so the synopsis is Coates writes a letter to his son about realities of being Black in the United States. It's written by similar to James Baldwin's book. And what we have to do is we have to question is, why is the author writing this letter? And so the author outlines that he's writing this letter because of the constant violence placed upon Black bodies his son has had to witness, and that his son was learning that his body is just in constant jeopardy. And this book is broken up into 3 parts, and they're all exploring experiences that the author has had. So that's through home life, school life, being young on the streets, and into adulthood, all these different perspectives and experiences the author has had. And this book packs such a punch, and there's so many basically quotes. I've just grabbed a bunch of quotes so we could just kind of, I don't know, highlight them because they just are really beautiful and powerful. So on page 27, I'm sorry, on page 17, the author writes, and I cannot say whether that violence, even administered in fear and love, sounded the alarm or choked us at the exit. And he's really talking about, like I was also part of that generation of like behind closed doors with your family, you would get spanked or hit or whatever, and how he's analyzing how that's actually just a part of a system to keep us in line. And he's not judging it, he's just more posing questions. Because if you're behind closed doors, kind of being taught how to be like a good citizen, like how to stay in line. But for him and his experiences, he then goes out into the world, and then more violence is being thrust upon him. Like, what is really the lesson here? What is he really getting from it? He's asking, how is this really helpful? And that's what I like that he does throughout the book. It's not really so much telling us, the audience, what to think. He's just framing his experiences and asking questions, and then wants the audience to reflect on it. And I'm sorry, I can hear my cat, and she's not going to stop crying. There's a juxtaposition the author is creating between the pursuit of happiness against the pursuit of knowledge, what the author frames as freedom. And that's on page 48. And I really like that because he's constantly piercing in the States what's considered the framework or what we should revere, and the pursuits that we should be chasing after, against how that pursuit of happiness, it's not really real. Just like the racial construct, it's not really real. This is all socially constructed to lift some people up and like hold back others. And he also talks about, hold on, I have to get her. What? Come inside. love that for me because I am not editing this. Here she goes. And so kind of going on to America being built on looting and violence. Again, there's that element of violence and how a whole nation historically has been built on this violence, and that we're kind of like sold this American dream of life, liberty, land. But it's really, oh, you know what I was thinking about? Because actually, at the end of last year, I was reading some books. I read All I See Is Violence, Wandering Stars, There, and also The Promised Boys. I haven't, but my cat's she's being a lot right now. I'll say show you. And reading all those books really made me reflect on how the American dream is really unfortunate, because that also means, like, if I have a dream, that means someone else has to live a nightmare. And so that's not a dream worth pursuing, because that it's really just like reinforcing injustices and inhumanity. And I feel like that's something that really Ta-Nehisi Coates is getting at. And early on in this book, the author says that a reporter asks him for answers, which is that he has to do the work. So a journalist asks Ta-Nehisi Coates for answers, and so there's a couple of problems with that. One is that a journalist is looking for someone that's put in constant danger for the answers to something that he didn't do. So it's like going to a victim, or like, let's say someone house gets robbed, and then the robber then asks them, why did I rob your house? Like, why don't you fix it? And so there's just a huge problem with that. But also, this is someone that has sets a tone really early on to let us know that he is not optimistic. He is taking the past that informs the present and saying what's going on in the present is just going to inform the future. And these changes have not been made for the better. He's just saying, this is just what I see. And then if anybody thinks that he has answers, then he's failed, because he's not hopeful. He doesn't think that there's resolution to this. There are some words or phrases that really stood out to me. One of them was like the banality of violence, which, and also plunder. Plunder is a word that he was very aptly used throughout the book, and was also used in The Water Dancer, which I did read. And by the way, in my TBR video, I said that Between the World and Me was going to be the first book that I read by him. And then I don't know what happened in my brain. I forgot. I read this in 2020. It was a pandemic. That's what it was. I read this in 2020, and then I even watched like a virtual talk, because virtual talks were all the jam to keep us from losing our mind in 2020. And so plunder is a very significant word, a very apt word for what the author is trying to get across about what the states are built on. And there's another phrase he said, the machinery of criminal power. And I thought that was very powerful, hearing him phrase what he's talking about, which is actually just systemic. He's saying that it's like the spoken cog, it's all just keeps going. And so I thought that was just, once again, there's so much more to talk about this book, but I'm trying to talk about like everything, because then I'll just might as well read the book too, because it's so incredible. There's a delicate use of alliteration to his prose that sharpens his point throughout the book. I also love his use of imagery. Like, for instance, again, that word plunder comes up again. Plundering of bodies, plundering of earth. And ultimately what he's getting at is that conflict begets conflict that begets conflict. So he's narrowing in on the subject of racial identity and racism. And then he's expanding it to say, like, there's this plundering of bodies that's being used. And we're just, the states and actually universally are making it worse by plundering the earth. Because we're treating the earth like it belongs to us, and it really doesn't. And I thought that was so beautiful. And it also reminded me of a couple of things. I'm trying to make sure I stay on task. He makes it clear that from the beginning that he is not an optimist, and that he's outlining the systems and the frameworks to plunder bodies in the earth. And he's just like constantly making those connections throughout. And so I kind of feel like he starts narrowly and then he just kind of like expands, but he's threading that through the entire time. There is a quote in here. I have like 2 books. I want to close my door because my cats, but I think they might start meowing again. Ginger's giving me a sinister look from afar. All right, so I'll read a quote. I don't think I wrote it down on my notes, but there's something that stuck out to me that I was reading from his book that reminded me of a short story, nonfiction, I think, that I read in Octavia's Brood, which is, it's science fiction, stories from social justice movements, edited by Adrienne Marie Brown and Walida Emarisha. So we'll discuss this. So the author wrote on page 143, I am convinced that the dreamers, at least the dreamers of today, would rather live white than live free. In the dream they are Buck Rogers, Prince Aragorn, an entire race of Skywalkers. To awaken them is to reveal that they are an empire of humans, and like all empires of humans are built on the destruction of the body. It is to stain their nobility, to make them vulnerable, fallible, breakable humans. And that really stuck out to me because there's another author that wrote a very short, I guess you could say, essay that's called Star Wars and the American Imagination, written by Mumia Abu-Jabal. And he goes on to write something similar. And on page 256, he wrote, America, the empire, didn't like its role, at least among its young. It wanted to imagine itself as a ragtag band, fighting against great odds, against an evil empire. It imagined itself as it wanted to be, as it had claimed to be in its infancy against a cruel and despotic king in the late 18th century. It reshaped itself into the rebels, not the imperial overlords. It shaped itself as oppressed, fighting for freedom. But America, like every nation, is its ages of psychosis. It has fits of indecision and period of self-delusion. And so both these authors are really tapping into this dream is delusion, right? And that we're not accepting reality of what's been done and what continues to be done. And so I just thought that was like an incredible connection between both those books. I have so many notes I'm trying to remember. I'm trying to stay on point. With all that said, there's actually so much more. I'll say one more thing, but it's kind of like not cohesive. There is a whole other conversation the author has about women being bridges. This is also something that I feel like he's also juxtaposing against destruction. And so he is also having conversations, like gendered conversation, about his experience as a Black male and the experiences of Black women and what they go through. And I thought that was like very, I appreciated the nuance and specificities of that conversation. That's what I'm trying to get at. That's my cat, I'm sorry. So how does this relate to the television version of Louis? In the show, Louis mentions that his grandfather was a sugar plantation owner, and then it's up to him to continue the survival and and help his family out. Ginger's a mess today. So here's a quote from the book. And I felt this cosmic injustice, a profound cruelty, which infused an abiding irrepressible desire to unshackle my body and achieve the velocity of escape. And that stood out to me as I was thinking about Louis changing from a human to a vampire. He's just like not in a good place mentally. He's lost his brother. His mother blames him for what happened to his brother, but also he's dealing with a society that's that he's constantly up against and he's in danger of. And so I think in a moment of desperation and despair and having someone in front of him say that they see him for who he is, he agrees to something, because on some level, even on a subconscious level, Louis' turning is about him maybe thinking that he needs to change, that he has to like transmute himself into this other thing. But really, it's not Louis that needs to change on those like specific points. It's actually the world around him that needs to change. So there's a quote from page 28. My understanding of the universe was physical, and its moral arc bent toward chaos, then concluded in a box. And that really made me think about, once again, how like every day Louis' human existence is at risk. But just like Ta-Nehisi Coates, what he's really saying is there's a lifetime of like danger and violence he's up against until the day he dies. And so he's using box to reference like a coffin. And I would say we can also link that to Louis, because every night he's up against the world. And then at night, there's that reflection of him being in a coffin. And so I thought that was kind of like an interesting way to look at or frame the show against this quote and visualization that the author is providing. Last quote, on page 32, Coates writes, "Why were only our heroes nonviolent? I speak not of the morality of nonviolence, but of the sense that Blacks are in especial need of this morality." And so really what he's getting at in the book is like the education system, and how when he sees like figures in history, it's always the ones that are like non-violence that are praised, and none of them, like, why is that the lesson, right? And that is interesting, because then we have like the Civil War, where like so much violence was committed to get something done. I'm kind of adding that. The author didn't say that, but I was just thinking about that. Anyways, when I read that, I was reflecting on how not just Louis, but Claudia are both characters that at times they will attack people that Lestat tells them not to. So you're giving two people so much power that are in a state of being oppressed, but then you're also saying, but don't take out the people that are in power, that are creating the power imbalance, right? That are making it difficult for you to exist. And so it's like, why do they have to follow those rules, right? And so Louis is made into a vampire, but then all of a sudden it's like, yeah, but don't do this, this, and this. So it's like, why be a vampire? You know, when you have to be careful about who you eat for lunch. So yeah, all that just really stood out to me. There's so much to be said about this book. I really loved it. And if you haven't read Octavia's Brood, you know I'm a fan of Octavia Butler, and so they're writing with her in mind. So yeah, all those books are worth picking up, as well as if any of what we talk about as far as a framework of what the author's tackling, and my cats are now gone, so I can show this to you. You could read The Promised Boys is really good. This is YA. All I See Is Violence, which, as you know, if you're watching my shorts, gave me a little bit of the depression. and anything by Tommy Orange. So there are these 2 books by Tommy Orange, but he also has some short stories and other work out there. And so the next book review I should have out, which I can't believe I'm saying this because the book was supposed to be last. I think I'm going to have the book review next Wednesday for the library. This is such a dry read, but I am enjoying it. And which one will this will fulfill the prompt that about Louis love of reading, basically. So that should be coming out next, which I'm kind of shocked, but because it's a tome, and I don't do tomes. So I know this is a little bit of a long-winded review, but this book was so incredibly good. I don't think I even touched everything compared to like what my notes were about this book. But yeah, now that's 2 books down by that author, and I definitely want to read all his other work. And there are also some really incredible interviews on YouTube with Coates that I've really been enjoying. So if you like this review, please let me know your thoughts actually on this book. But also, if you read a book to fulfill this prompt that's different from what I read, go ahead and let me know your thoughts. Feel free to let me know if you read the same book and also what your thoughts are against what the prompt is. I'm also still using StoryGraph as a read along, and I'm kind of like messing with the options. So I think for every book I read for this prompt, once I open it up, I'll have the read along open until the end of February when I'm done covering this character. I think I left it shorter, but then I opened it up again because I'm still kind of new to using these functions in StoryGraph. So thank you for everyone that's supporting my bookish endeavors. Thank you to all the new subscribers. I hope you're really enjoying this readathon as much as I am. It's like probably the most exciting thing I've experienced so far on YouTube. I've never done like a readathon before, so this is just really an absolute delight. All right, everyone, thank you so much, and I hope to see you in the chat.